Welcome to this video about using the auto-rigging to create your characters faster. So for this example, I use the drag and rule character, which already has a couple of configurations created. So we create now a new one using auto-rigging. The process of creating the character stays the same because it just means setting models, rigs, skins, and so forth. But auto-rigging helps to improve or speed up the creation of configurations. So let's create one. Let's say auto-rig example. So we have then this character and an empty configuration. So we can first align it so we see a little better how it is looking. The first thing we have to do is still setting the calibration move, which we have to do in Blender or a similar application. And we can also select where we want the camera to be positioned. This we still have to do manually because there exists no real systems for such a thing. So the rest we don't need. We start out first by adding, for example, an 11 tracker setup. And these setups create their tracking positions or the tracker positions on the proportions of a default human. So in this reason, it is not matching and you would have to manually shift them into position. This can be also simplified with auto-rigging, but we have to postpone this until we have our first motion transfer. So let's start out by adding an automatic human motion transfer. So this basically means you would have to set a couple of bones, but instead of setting it manually, we can now use auto-rigging. Auto-rigging is defined as XML files which store rules how to figure out what bone belongs to which setting in a motion transfer. There are a couple of pre-created profiles, but these are, as mentioned, XML files, so you can create them yourself. You can, for example, create a modification and upload them to mod.io for others to use, or you can propose them for inclusion in DEMoCap directly. So you can either select which kind of auto-rigging you want to use if you know it, but you can also just use best matching auto-rig. And this one simply probes all auto-rigging profiles which are matching for this motion transfer and picks the one which yields the highest count of matches. So let's do this, and we have now our character set up with the most basic bone chains fit in. We still have to select the moves like the base eco or crouch if we have it, but these are only to improve the result and are not part of auto-rigging because these are anyways manually created. Fine-tuning and stuff you can modify if you want, but this gives you a basic character setup which would already work. So now that we have the motion transfer, we can also go back and get our character positions for our tracker slots set up. And this is also inside this menu of the motion transfer, and it's called auto slot placement. And what it does is it uses the bones that have been found to figure out where are a good starting point for the positions. So let's do it. So we've seen the hand has moved now into a better position, or stuff like the elbow, it has moved, or even stuff like this has been moved into a position. This gives good starting positions, but most probably you have to fine tune them a bit, especially if the character bones are off center, not well suitable, but this gives you a good starting position. So now we had already a character which would be basically working, but we can do more than that. Let's add, for example, fingers, and let's call it right hand. Let's select tracker. We want to use our right hand controller for this. So in the menu, we have a couple of bunch of settings. We have an init for each hand and the auto-rigging for each hand. So let's first init the right hand. This gives us some rotations of the finger. So this is most probably always the same for most characters. And then you can select again which fingers you want to rig. Let's best matching, and we get now our bone chain setup. Now we have here a character which has which has 4 bones in his finger. So in these situations, you could then go and manually adjust a little bit or enlarge the bones. But if you have a regular character, there's no need for this kind of enlargement. But I will do it here because this character is a little different. Let's do the same for the left hand. And again, select the controller, left hand, init, auto-rig, and because it's a little bit of a special character, we just enlarge a little bit the chain so all bones are included. So that's it for the fingers. They would be now also working. So let's continue and say, okay, we have maybe eyes. Here again, we can choose auto-rigging, and as you can see, different motion transfers use different or show different profiles. You can use the same XML files, but only those profiles which define potential bones to auto-rig for the motion transfer you have selected will be shown. So it's automatic to pick which one. I do also use best matching, and this will give you the bones, in this case the pupils, and a reasonable default rotation, which uses the bone orientation, which usually goes through the pupil, as the z-axis, and the other axes are aligned upwards with an upward direction of the character. If your character doesn't have bones lined up like this, you would have to adjust the rotation, but for most of the time, this kind of rotation works. So that already sets up the eyes. We can adjust the limits up and down, but that you have to fine tune because this is very specific for models and your tracking device used. But we can also add face. And this is one of those places where auto-rigging really helps because you have here a ton of facial shapes you can choose. And setting them by hand is a little bit annoying, but here again, I could select for potential systems or just say auto-rig and bam, the stuff is set up for you in a fraction of the time. So that's it. The face is already set up. And another one which uses auto-rigging is the lip sync. Here you have the same problem. I could use auto-rig and I get them filled in. So at this point in time, I have now a character with the basic human with hands, eyes, face, and lip sync set up and ready to be used with the typical kind of modifications tuning. So let's go into VR and see how this is looking.
So here we are. Let's give it a test. Selecting the character, that new auto-rigging configuration we've created. Let's activate it and calibrate. So here we are. Our newly created and with auto-rig built character is ready to be used and fully functioning given what we have at disposal. So here is a Quest 3S, so stuff like eye tracking does not work, and lip sync is done using the voice. Facial tracking also works, not because there is no face tracker and also no feet tracker. But if you have the entire setup, then you would have directly a character which is fully working according to your setups. So This is a fast way to get your characters up and running, so you can then use later configurations to fine-tune your character for the different directions and quickly get started with your motion capture work. So I hope this helps you getting faster up and running for your action. Have a nice day. See you.